Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Monday, November 24th. Huge weekend just took place for BYU sports. It was massive. BYU football, BYU basketball, even some of the Olympic sports had huge wins over the weekend. So Cougar sports are riding high right now. But we got to talk about something off the field to start today's show off in our top story of the day.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
It takes away from the football game, but Cincinnati's athletic director, John Cunningham, issued a statement on Monday morning from the University of Cincinnati Bearcats X account, and he apologized for the derogatory chants that occurred during the BYU Cincinnati game at Nippert Stadium, to the point where the public address announcer had to tell fans to stop chanting those derogatory remarks. This was Cincinnati AD John Cunningham. On Monday, he said, quote, "On behalf of the University of Cincinnati and Bearcats Athletics, I want to sincerely apologize to the BYU community and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The use of offensive or religiously derogatory language by a group of fans during Saturday's game was unacceptable and does not reflect our values. We remain committed to creating an environment at Nippert Stadium where every visiting team and its supporters are treated with dignity and respect." End quote. Again, that's from John Cunningham, Cincinnati Director of Athletics. And I think that's a fine apology. And honestly, I think that it's fascinating to me how this continues to happen. And the University of Colorado, of course, earlier this year in a football game in the Big 12, they had similar chants where it was bleep the Mormons. And the University of Colorado got issued a $50,000 fine from the Big 12. No official word yet as of this show from the Big 12 in terms of a fine for the University of Cincinnati. But I'll just never understand why people resort to that sort of chant. And it was interesting, on Saturday morning at Big Noon Kickoff, there were no offensive chants. Even before the show started, the DJ or the MC of the event that takes place, in between what you see on TV on Big Noon Kickoff, he even told the fans and primarily students in the crowd, hey, please do not have any offensive derogatory chants that are curse words because we don't want to mute the audio. And they kind of let people chant things before the show started, none of which was bleep the Mormons. It was more bleep BYU, which if you want to do that, fine, go ahead. I still think that's always, to me, smack talk that's just not smart. It's like you have no other thoughts. You don't really have much insight and intel into the teams that you're trying to smack talk on. You're just resorting to a swear word, and then you're attacking someone's faith. And it just makes no sense why teams resort to that. And typically when this happens, and it's been happening more often than not since 2021 in regards to BYU sports, but when these chants happen, BYU typically wins. The only time that it hasn't been a positive for BYU in terms of the win column was 2022 against Oregon. But unfortunate that this has to happen, because I hate when someone's getting attacked for their faith or the way that they look or their beliefs. There's no place for that. And if you want to make it about the football field, by all means, make it about that. Fine. There's friendly smack talk that can go around, but even at Big Noon Kickoff, some of the signs, I was seeing signs that said, Joseph Smith's a false prophet. What does that have to do with BYU versus Cincinnati, a game that is for Big 12 championship stakes, college football playoff implications? No, you're turning it into a religious thing, and you're bringing up Joseph Smith. That, to me, I'll never understand what the thought process is. And look, I understand college students. College is ultimately a learning opportunity to educate yourself and to get better and be a better person in society when you're ready to move forward. But I'll just never understand why, hey, BYU's coming to town, let's make signs about Joseph Smith. They were there at Big Noon Kickoff. There was even a sign that looked like the Ten Commandments. And I just thought, why? I don't understand why that has to be the thing. If you want to make it about football, like there was some sign that said Kalani Sitake has no neck. Fine. Again, I don't understand why you have to mock someone's appearance, but fine, whatever on that. I'd rather that than saying Joseph Smith's a false prophet. That's just me. So another apology issued to the board. There's been many of them. Colorado in football earlier this year, the University of Arizona in basketball, last basketball season earlier this calendar year, Providence a season ago in basketball. Texas Tech, their basketball coach went on the mic before the football game in Lubbock and said, no place for that. I know there's some popular chants to BYU. Don't say it. And to Texas Tech's credit, they had signage inside the stadium when there were chants of bleep BYU. They said, don't make it about them. Make it about us. And I can kind of respect that. And they instantly silenced even the bleep BYU chants. There were no attacks on BYU's faith in that game in Lubbock. So, it almost feels like it's becoming a popular thing where students just want to keep bringing it up. Maybe there needs to be some sort of educational opportunities from these schools saying, hey, please don't do this. Don't attack the faith of this institution, which, again, a lot of the players on BYU's team are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I would be fascinated to honestly ask some of these players that are not members of the church and think, what do you guys make of this? Where this always happens and it's not about football and it's something far different, the smack talk and the chants. And look, I think that's why, BYU, it's a polarizing place. You either love the Cougs or you don't. And I know for our listeners here on Cougar Tracks, you love BYU. And BYU means a lot to you. And I think that emboldens the passion of BYU when you go into these territories and they're attacking the faith. BYU means a lot to so many people beyond just the sports. It's the faith, too. And when that gets attacked, it's just unfortunate. And hopefully we don't see that in the future because it's unfortunate. I saw the original video from an Instagram user, and she posted it, and she was at Nippert Stadium and excited, I think she said, back in Ohio, so maybe she's got some connections to the state of Ohio. And then she sees that, and she hears that, and it just probably makes you feel a little uncomfortable. And it's unfortunate that sort of thing has to happen at a football game, which ultimately should just be, win or lose, a fun experience where whatever stadium you're in. And that's one thing I will say about LaVell Edwards Stadium. Sometimes it's a little much where you think, do you really have to wave a flag for the visiting team that's here, that's in your conference? Do you really have to give ice cream to the visiting team? Well, I think now when you take a step back and you think about what BYU does at its home venue, because they know what goes on at these road venues. It happens more often than not, it seems like, anymore, regardless of what part of the country it is. They almost want to break down barriers and they say, hey, we're sports fans too. We're normal people too. We want to give you a great experience here at BYU. And much better to have that sort of messaging than needing Brian Santiago to go on X or social media and issue a statement. And it's crazy how often I go on the road for these BYU sporting events and you have to request a comment for this sort of deal. This is probably the only beat in college football where we've got like a draft almost every road game where, hey, AD, do you got to comment on this? Just what's part of the job, I guess, when it comes to covering BYU sports. But we obviously enjoy doing it. I know I do, especially covering this BYU football team, which is flying high. We'll get to more breakdown of BYU's win over Cincinnati, but had to hit that breaking news today as Cincinnati's AD issued an apology to BYU after those derogatory chants at Nippert Stadium after BYU takes down the Bearcats 26-14 in Cincy over the weekend. The Cougs are now 10-1 overall this season. Taking a break, we'll get to more BYU football talk next here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day we're coming to you here on YouTube and KSL News Radio to discuss the latest in BYU sports. And for BYU football, they're riding high after a big win over Cincinnati, 26-14 at Nippert Stadium, and the Cougs are now 10-1 overall. And it was an amazing night for running back L.J. Martin, 222 rushing yards for the superstar running back out of El Paso, Texas. And LJ, it's funny, this whole year I've been talking about LJ, how he is just going to level up, and this team will be going as far as LJ Martin will take them. Now the nation is starting to finally realize, after a 200-yard game, how special this player is. LJ Martin was outstanding for the Cougars, and he won the day for BYU, and that's where we want to start things off in the Stock Exchange as BYU gets that big win over Cincinnati.
The Cougar Stock Exchange. What's trending up and what's trending down? It's the Cougar Stock Exchange.
We do this every Monday here on Cougar Tracks, trending up and trending down, what we call the Stock Exchange here on the show. And trending up, like I said, L.J. Martin, 222 rushing yards on 32 carries. And you get 32 carries, you're thinking maybe, what's the average going to be for that big of a workload? Maybe 3-4 yards per carry? No, he goes off for 6.9 yards per carry. LJ was a beast, and he's continuing to evolve as a receiver out of the backfield, too. 3 catches for 44 yards. Yards after catch, 60 yards for LJ Martin. I really think we're looking at an NFL running back next year, and honestly, if he can be a top 100 draft pick, I think you've got to go, because in the NFL, the running back position has such a short shelf life where, if you get beyond 4 years, that's pretty special. And look at what Tyler Algier has done. Right fit. I know it's, been a little bit split with Bijan Robinson, but, Tyler Algier goes as a 5th-round pick in 2022. He has been a consistent force in that backfield for the Falcons. I don't think he's yet fumbled the football in the NFL. I think LJ is a perfect NFL running back. His size, he's added, he trimmed down a little bit this year. Last year, he made a focus to bulk up. I think he was a little bit too heavy a season ago. This year, he trimmed down a little bit, but he looks fantastic. And remember, too, he's still working his way back to getting to full strength from the shoulder injury that he suffered back on October 25th. And you think about his production this year, he's got 1,100 yards rushing this season. And you factor in the Iowa State game, he only played 1 quarter in that one. That was on October 25th. The November 8th game at Texas Tech, he wasn't fully healthy. So you're talking about 1,100 yards in about 9 games or so, 9.5 games, you'd say, for LJ Martin. Impressive stuff from the BYU junior running back, who it'd be fantastic if he runs it back next season, but I totally understand if he says, you know what, I'm going to the league. Back at the East Carolina game in September, I even had people telling me that there's a chance LJ could go to the NFL after this year. I mean, there's a lot of stock. Every practice you go to down at BYU, there's NFL scouts, tons of NFL personnel going to these BYU games. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if LJ goes, and I think all of Cougar Nation can understand that. And look, BYU, they have success getting running backs out of the transfer portal. It would have been great this year had they got some portal running backs, because the whole position is centered around LJ Martin this year. But in the past, they've had a ton of success going to the portal. So if you have to go to that well this offseason, I think BYU can find some great running backs. But LJ's special. He is a big-time talent. And you think about the running backs that Kalani has had during his time. Jamal Williams for that 1 year in 2016, Tyler Algier, LJ Martin. There's been some great RBs at BYU. Chris Brooks, Tyson Williams, even Aiden Robbins. I mean, there have been some excellent ball carriers out of the backfield for BYU since Kalani Sitake took over this program. And LJ's right there with Tyler Algier and Jamal as one of the best, and I thought that was his finest hour as a BYU Cougar at Nippert Stadium on Saturday, and hopefully he can continue to have better performances moving forward for the Cougars. I think also what's trending up for BYU, when we look at the Stock Exchange here, ability to close out games on the ground. And I know that midway through the fourth quarter, it looked like Bear was a little shaken up. He was grimacing a bit on the sideline, and they didn't throw the football after that moment. But I think that for BYU, the ability to know that they can close out a football game on the ground, that's huge for this team because they did that quite a bit last season. There were games where they would just kill the clock running the football and basically saying to an opponent, you can't stop us. And they did that this weekend. And look, it's not the 30, 40-point win. So in terms of style points, I don't know if it's that glamorous, but to me, it's a style of football play that says that's an excellent elite football team that can physically overwhelm you. And that style of play, I think, translates to a lot of different teams that you face. Now, it didn't show up against Texas Tech, but again, there's a little bit of a caveat that LJ was not at full strength, and he even admitted he didn't have the confidence in his shoulder going into that game. So, they're potentially 1 week away. If BYU just wins their game, if Texas Tech wins their game, it's a rematch in Arlington next week. And look, that Texas Tech rush defense is elite. It's one of the best run defenses I've ever seen BYU face, at least in the Kalani Sitake era. So it's no easy task, but if they can have success against them potentially in Arlington, I think you can run the football on anyone if you can have some sort of success against Texas Tech, but that will be a beast in 2 weeks, again, assuming BYU gets there. Trending down, I think, a little bit the wide receiver unit just because of the injury to Chase Roberts. So we'll see what the timeline is there with Chase, but him getting shaken up. Kalani said that Chase willingly pulled himself out and was somewhat optimistic that he would return this season. After the game, I saw Chase kind of having a moment with BYU offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick on the field at Nippert Stadium, but I want to see maybe a little bit more playmaking ability from that receiver unit. But again, it was a game, too, where you're running the football and you're leaning on the ground attack to get the job done. So I also understand that side of it. But if you don't have Chase Roberts from an availability standpoint, that position naturally goes down a bit because when you're talking about trying to win a Big 12 championship, when you're trying to win games in the playoff, you've got to have your best players available, and Chase Roberts is one of their best players. And, we talked a lot about L.J. Martin being an NFL guy. Chase Roberts, to me, is also an NFL receiver as well, and you want him available for BYU. I think you can get by against UCF without him, but in the Big 12 championship and a possible playoff, you want Chase Roberts there and available for BYU, so they need him or else that position could be trending down in terms of a stock report for the Cougars. I also continue to be impressed when you look at things that are trending up for BYU. Some of the performances from the tight end position. I thought Kean Need was very good in his blocking abilities. It goes unnoticed quite a bit because he's not a target in the passing game, but even Carson Ryan continues to have steady performances within this BYU offense. I thought Kean Need was very solid in the blocking department as well for BYU. The offensive line, I thought Bruce Mitchell, we spoke with him after the game. I thought he had a really solid performance as well. And when you have a day where a running back goes off for 222, that's in large part because of the blocking ability from an offensive line. So by all accounts, BYU football had a great weekend, taking down the Bearcats 26-14. Again, they're now 10-1 overall this season. That's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a ton, and I'll talk to you tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks from Florida. Going to be here all week for the holiday and for BYU basketball and their MTE out in Orlando. So talk to you next time here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports.